If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you my son, Eric, was a good man. He was busy, sure, too busy for his old dad most of the time, but I chalked it up to the pressures of life in San Diego. He had his job, his family, his endless excuses. Still, I always hoped, deep down, that the boy I'd raised was still in there somewhere. That hope died on the day of my wife's funeral. My wife, Lillian, passed away on a cold, gray Thursday in March. 40 years we'd spent together, and she'd fought until the end. Cancer doesn't care who it takes, or how many promises you make to each other about growing old together. As I stood by her casket that morning, polished mahogany and white roses glistening with dew from the overnight rain, I realized I was alone for the first time in my adult life. Alone, except for the friends and relatives who'd come from as far as Colorado and Texas to pay their respects. Everyone was there, everyone except my son. I'd called Eric at least 5 times that morning, my hands trembling as I dialed his number again and again. Each call went to voicemail, and each time I heard his automated greeting, my heart sank a little lower. When he finally answered 30 minutes before the service, there was laughter in the background. Waves, music, and the distant sound of people enjoying themselves. "Dad, I'm in the middle of something important. I can't make it. I'll call you later," he said. His voice was cold, dismissive, and when I pressed him, "What could be more important than your mother's funeral?" he simply sighed and told me, "Honestly, Dad, it's not worth my time. Stop bothering me." The phone felt like lead in my hand. I could barely look at Lillian's casket, knowing her only son wouldn't be there for her final farewell. The service began under the gray skies of Oak Grove Cemetery in Northern California. Relatives in black coats gathered under the awning, their voices hushed. I shook hands, accepted condolences, all while my mind replayed Eric's words. Not worth my time. That's what my son thought of his mother's life. As the pastor spoke of Lillian's kindness, her years teaching at Jefferson Elementary, the children she'd loved, the neighbors she'd helped, I tried to listen. Tried to remember the woman who had always believed Eric would come around. "He's just busy, Henry," she'd tell me. "He'll show up when it matters." But he didn't. Instead, as I later learned, he was basking in the Florida sun with his wife, posting videos of palm trees and poolside drinks while his mother was lowered into the earth. That night, I sat alone at our kitchen table, Lillian's crossword puzzle book open beside a cold cup of coffee. I scrolled through my phone and saw Eric's wife, Megan, had posted a story from their Miami hotel. "Perfect weather, perfect day." My jaw clenched. While I'd buried my wife with trembling hands, Eric was living his best life, hundreds of miles away, without a single word of apology. I remembered Lillian's final days. Even as her strength faded, she worried about Eric. "Promise me you'll try to understand him, Henry," she'd whispered. "He loves us, in his own way. He just doesn't know how to show it." I promised her, but as I sat there in the silence of our home, her favorite mug still sitting by the sink, I realized some promises are too heavy to carry. The days that followed were a blur. Friends came by with casseroles, neighbors dropped off flowers, but the house felt emptier with each passing hour. I found myself talking to Lillian's photograph, asking her what I should do. She always had the answers, but now there was only silence. A week after the funeral, my phone rang. It was Eric. "Dad, the mortgage payment for the condo didn't go through. Did something happen with the automatic transfer?" His tone was impatient, as if I'd misplaced his car keys instead of just burying his mother. I felt something in me break. For years I'd paid his mortgage, first because he was starting out, later because Lillian insisted he needed the help. But now the man who skipped his mother's funeral was calling, not to ask how I was, but to complain about his bills. I answered him quietly. "Eric, I don't care anymore." "That's your problem." There was a stunned silence on the line. "Dad, what's that supposed to mean?" he asked, but I had nothing left to give him. Not money, not excuses, not even sympathy. That was only the beginning. I spent the next morning walking the quiet streets of Willow Park, just outside Sacramento, where Lillian and I had lived for nearly 30 years. The cherry trees were blooming, their pink petals drifting across the sidewalks. I tried to lose myself in memories of happier springs, but my mind kept circling back to Eric and that phone call. I wondered if I'd been too harsh, if I should have explained myself, but then I'd remember his words, "Not worth my time," and the anger would return, bitter and cold. My sister-in-law, June, called that afternoon. "Henry, I know things are hard, but are you eating? Do you want me to come by?" I thanked her and told her I was fine, though I hadn't slept through the night since the funeral. I kept thinking about how much Lillian had done for Eric. How many nights she stayed up with him when he was sick, how she worked extra hours at the school library so he could go to a good college. When his first business failed in San Jose, she was the one who encouraged me to lend him the money to try again. "He just needs a little help," she'd say, her eyes always full of hope. But Eric never came by the house after the funeral. He didn't call to ask how I was, or to check on anything. The only thing he wanted was his mortgage paid. For 8 years, I'd sent money every month to his bank in Dallas, because Lillian wanted him to have a chance to make it in real estate. That was the arrangement, my retirement fund quietly disappearing so my son could keep his dream alive. Lillian had believed in him with a stubbornness I admired, even as it wore me down. After our argument, Eric tried a different approach. He called Megan on speakerphone, and this time his voice was sharp. "Dad, you're acting unreasonable. It's just one payment. If you're upset about Mom, I get it, but can we please not make this harder than it needs to be?" Megan chimed in. "We've got bills, Dad. You've always helped us out. Why are you being so difficult now?" I almost laughed. Difficult? For years I'd done everything for them, quietly, without asking for thanks. Now, the first time I needed support, they talked to me like a stubborn child. "You missed your mother's funeral," I said, my voice low. "And now you're worried about money?" Eric went quiet for a moment, then said, "Dad, we all grieve differently. I just couldn't be there. But the world doesn't stop turning. I've got responsibilities too." Maybe that's true, I thought. Maybe the world keeps spinning whether we show up or not. But Lillian would have wanted more from her only son. She would have wanted him to at least pretend to care. I sat on the front porch that evening, watching the sun set over the neat rows of houses. The neighbors were out, walking dogs, waving from their lawns. Lillian loved this time of day. She'd make tea, sit beside me on the swing, and talk about everything she wanted to do in retirement: road trips up the coast, visiting old friends in Montana, maybe even a cruise through Alaska. Those dreams faded when her illness took hold. In the end, the only place she wanted to be was home, with me. I tried to keep the house exactly as she left it. Her gardening gloves still hung by the back door. Her slippers waited at the foot of the bed. I hadn't moved a single photo from the mantel. That night, I looked through our old albums, page after page of Eric's childhood. Birthday parties, camping trips, his high school graduation in the rain. Lillian beaming beside him, so proud. She always believed he'd do great things, that he'd become a man who understood the value of family. But Eric had changed. Maybe it was the years in Texas, maybe it was Megan's influence, or maybe I'd just missed the signs. He'd grown distant, then cold. Phone calls were shorter. Visits were excuses. Birthdays became text messages. And when Lillian needed him most, he was nowhere to be found. I started thinking about my own future. For so long, I'd planned everything around my family. Every dollar saved was for them. Every sacrifice made was for Eric's future, Lillian's comfort. Now, it was just me. I wondered what I'd do with the years left to me, with the savings I hadn't already spent on Eric's dreams. Maybe I'd finally see those places Lillian wanted to visit. Maybe I'd just keep the garden going, one season at a time. The next morning, I woke to another call from Eric. This time, he sounded desperate. "Dad, the bank called. They said the mortgage is overdue. Megan's worried we'll lose the condo. Please, I need you to handle this. You always do." I looked out the window at Lillian's roses, blooming in the early sun. I felt a strange sense of peace. "Eric, you're going to have to figure this out on your own," I said. "I can't help you anymore." He didn't yell. He didn't plead. He just went quiet. "You really mean that?" he finally asked. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Yes, son. I really do." I hung up, and for the first time since Lillian died, I felt the weight begin to lift from my shoulders. I expected Eric to call back that afternoon. He didn't. Instead, Megan left me a voice message, her tone brittle and urgent. "Henry, this is Megan. Look, I know things have been hard, but you can't just leave us hanging like this. We've got a family now. If Eric upset you, I'm sorry. We just need you to take care of the mortgage for a little longer. Please call me back." Her words rolled off me like rain. For years, I'd been the silent safety net, always there, always reliable. But as I stared at the empty kitchen, Lillian's teapot cold on the stove, I realized that all those years of help hadn't taught Eric or Megan anything about standing on their own feet. If anything, it had taught them I would always rescue them, no matter what. The days settled into a new kind of quiet. I spent hours in the garden, kneeling in the soft dirt, pruning the rose bushes Lillian had planted her first summer in this house. Each bloom felt like a small miracle, a reminder of the life we built together. The neighbors waved, asked if I needed anything. I always said no, not wanting to trouble anyone with my grief. At night, I'd sit in her old rocking chair by the window, watching the moonlight spill across the lawn. It was peaceful, but lonely in a way I hadn't expected. A week passed. I cleaned out Lillian's closet, donating her clothes to the church thrift store. The volunteer, a kind young woman named Bethany, offered a gentle smile as she took the boxes. "She was a good woman, Mr. Parker," she said. "We'll make sure these find a good home." I thanked her, realizing that, in some way, this was the first step toward letting go. One afternoon, as I finished weeding the flower beds, the phone rang. I recognized Eric's number but let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear more pleas for money, more reasons why I should forget everything he'd done. I listened later, standing by the sink with the sun warm on my back. "Dad, I get that you're mad. I messed up. But if you stop the payments, I'll lose the condo. Megan and the kids will have nowhere to go. Is that what you want? I know I should have come to the funeral, but I couldn't. I couldn't deal with it. Mom would have understood. Please, just help me out until I get back on my feet." He sounded smaller somehow, less sure of himself. I remembered him as a little boy, running through the sprinklers in our backyard, laughing with the kind of joy adults forget how to feel. Lillian always said, "He's got a good heart, Henry. He just needs time to find his way." I wanted to believe her, but time hadn't brought him any closer to home. That evening, I called my oldest friend, Joe. He'd lost his wife 5 years ago and had been through his own struggles with his grown children. We met for coffee at the old diner on Main Street, a place that hadn't changed since the 70s. Joe listened as I poured out the whole story, the funeral, the missed calls, the mortgage, the guilt. "You ever notice," he said after a while, "how we spend our whole lives teaching our kids to be independent, but we forget to stop holding the net under them? Maybe it's time Eric learned what happens when he falls." I nodded, thinking about what that would mean. "What if he never forgives me?" I asked. Joe shrugged. "That's his problem. You did your part. He's a grown man. Sometimes tough love is all you got left." We sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee, watching the last of the daylight fade outside the big plate glass window. I drove home feeling lighter. Joe was right. I'd carried Eric's burdens long enough. It was time he learned to carry his own. The next day, I logged into my bank account and stared at the line for Eric's mortgage payment. 96 transfers. 8 years of quiet sacrifice. I hovered over the cancel button, Lillian's voice in my memory. Promise me you'll take care of him. I'd kept that promise, longer than I should have. Now it was time for a new promise, one to myself. I clicked. Cancel payment. The computer chirped a confirmation. Just like that, the safety net was gone. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, the house felt changed. Not just quieter, but more peaceful, as if Lillian's spirit approved of my decision. I poured myself coffee and sat in the sunroom, watching robins hop across the lawn. I didn't check my phone, not for messages, not for missed calls. For the first time in years, I had nowhere to be and nothing I owed to anyone. By noon, though, the phone buzzed with a series of notifications. Eric again, this time with a new sense of urgency. His voice was tight, teetering between panic and anger. Dad, the bank called. The payment still hasn't come through. I'm getting emails about late fees now. Why aren't you answering me? Look, I said I was sorry about Mom. What else do you want? I can't believe you're doing this to me. I listened to his message, then set the phone back down. I realized, with a kind of gentle surprise, that I felt nothing, not anger, not guilt, just a quiet acceptance. I was done being manipulated by his emergencies. I was done equating love with financial rescue. The day drifted by as I sorted through Lillian's old teaching supplies. There were lesson plans with neat, looping handwriting, notes from students, photographs from decades of school plays and field trips. She'd loved her students almost as much as she loved her own family. That night, I made her favorite dinner, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, and ate at the kitchen table, her chair pulled close as if she might join me at any moment. Later, I found myself thinking about all the years Eric had taken for granted, Lillian's unwavering support, my steady hand, the invisible safety net always waiting. I remembered his first apartment, his first job offer, his first failed startup. Every stumble had been cushioned by a check from home, every hard lesson softened by our willingness to step in. But now, as the sun set over Willow Park, I wondered if we'd done him any favors. Maybe, by always making things easy, we'd made it impossible for him to learn how to stand on his own. Lillian had called it love, but maybe it was just fear that if we didn't help, he'd disappear from our lives completely. After dinner, I walked through the neighborhood, passing houses where kids played in the driveways and neighbors waved from porches. The world moved on, just as Joe had said. At the corner, I ran into Linda, who'd lived 3 doors down for as long as I could remember. She hugged me, asked how I was holding up, and listened as I told her about Eric. You know, Henry, she said, sometimes the only way people learn is when there's nobody left to bail them out. It's hard, but it's true. Her words echoed Joe's advice, and I felt their weight settle into my bones. Maybe this wasn't just about Eric growing up. Maybe it was about me letting go. When I returned home, I found another voicemail from Eric, this one more desperate. Dad, please. I don't have enough saved to cover the whole payment. Megan's freaking out. I know I screwed up, okay? But you can't just leave us like this. I'll make it up to you, I promise. But I'd heard that promise before. Too many times. Each time, it was just a way to push responsibility back onto my shoulders. I poured a glass of water and sat in the living room, staring at the empty spot where Lillian used to read every evening. For so long, every decision I made was about keeping the family together, protecting Eric from disappointment, making sure Lillian never worried. Now it was just me, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone. I felt free. Before bed, I called Joe again. We talked about the old days, fishing trips, ball games, the way our kids used to race bikes down Willow Avenue. I told him what Eric had said, how he'd promised to make it up to me. Joe just chuckled. Promises are easy when someone else is footing the bill, Henry. You did right. If he loves you, he'll figure it out, and if he doesn't, at least you'll know you tried. That night, I slept without dreams. In the quiet dark, I imagined Lillian smiling at me from across the table, proud that I'd finally learned to do what she never could, let go. The days that followed felt oddly bright. For years, I'd dreaded picking up the phone, sure that each call from Eric meant another problem, another rescue mission, another sacrifice. But now, with the monthly payment stopped and my own boundaries firm for the first time, I felt a lightness that surprised me. Instead of checking my phone for emergencies, I let myself remember what life used to feel like. Long afternoons working in the shed, reading the newspaper on the porch, tending Lillian's flower beds. I visited the local hardware store and found myself chatting with Tom, the owner, about fixing up the old gazebo in the backyard. I even went to the bakery on Saturday mornings, something Lillian always loved, buying pastries and coffee to share with neighbors who stopped by. With each small, normal thing, the ache of loss shifted into something softer. Grief, yes, but no longer so sharp. But as peaceful as my days became, the calls from Eric didn't stop. On the third morning after I'd canceled the payment, he finally caught me off guard and I answered out of habit. His voice was frantic. Dad, I don't know what to do. The bank says we're already late, and the penalty is adding up. Megan's threatened to take the kids to her parents' place if we lose the condo. You can't just cut us off. Please, just this once, just until we get past this rough patch. I listened, letting him finish. I remembered all the times Lillian had said, let's just help him one more time, Henry. He'll figure it out. But it never was just one more time. It never ended. I heard myself say, Eric, I've given you everything I could. I paid that mortgage for 8 years. You have a good job. This is your life to manage now. I'm sorry. He went quiet. I heard Megan in the background, her voice sharp, something about bills, about the kids, about my selfishness. Eric's voice broke. Dad, this isn't fair. I know I made mistakes. I know I should have come to the funeral, but I couldn't face it. Mom always forgave me. Why can't you? For a moment, my resolve faltered. I thought of Lillian's last days, the way she clung to hope, the way she excused every absence, every broken promise. But then I thought of her disappointment, too, how she'd quietly watched the door, waiting for Eric to come home, even when she knew in her heart he wouldn't. Your mother always believed you'd do the right thing, Eric, I said quietly. She gave you chance after chance, even when it hurt her. But loving someone isn't just about fixing their messes. Sometimes it's about letting them face the consequences. You need to take care of your own family now. I can't do it for you. He didn't answer. The silence hung between us, heavy and final. Finally, he hung up. That afternoon, I drove out to Lake Madison, where Lillian and I used to fish on quiet Sundays. I sat by the water, letting the breeze carry away the last of my guilt. I remembered the young man Eric used to be, the one who stayed up late talking to me about dreams, who helped his mom with groceries, who showed up when it mattered. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who saw love as a transaction, who expected support as his birthright. But as the sun set over the lake, I realized something important. Lillian would want me to find peace, even if Eric never understood. She would want me to live for myself, not just for the shadows of old promises. That evening, back home, I sat on the porch and wrote Eric a letter. I kept it short, no lectures, no bitterness. I told him I loved him, that I hoped he'd find his own strength, that I'd always remember the best parts of who he was. And I told him, gently but firmly, that my help had reached its end. The next day, I mailed the letter. When I walked back up the path, I felt lighter than I had in years. The garden was blooming. The sky was wide and blue. I closed my eyes and breathed in freedom, finally, at last. Weeks slipped by, one golden California afternoon after another. I tended the roses and the vegetable beds, made coffee for myself in the quiet house, and slowly, the ache of Lillian's absence became something I could carry. I kept to my routines, visiting the market, chatting with neighbors, reading on the porch as the sun dipped low over Willow Park. And with each passing day, the silence from Eric grew longer. He didn't call, and I didn't reach out. I suppose I'd imagined there would be one last argument, an angry confrontation, maybe a letter full of accusations and blame. But it never came. I received only silence, the sort that's cold and sharp at first, but then turns into a kind of peace. I realized that for the first time in decades, I was living my own life, not Eric's, not Lillian's, just mine. On Sundays, I started driving out to Stonefield Cemetery, where Lillian's grave was shaded by an old oak tree. I'd bring her yellow tulips, sit beside the marker, and talk to her as if she could hear me. I told her about the garden, about the new roof I'd finally fixed, about the neighbor's new dog who liked to dig up my tomatoes. Sometimes I told her about Eric, about the silence, the old memories, the hope that maybe, someday, he'd come around. But mostly, I talked about the future. About the places I wanted to visit, the books I still hoped to read. I told her how Joe and Linda and the others were looking out for me, how the community had rallied around in small, quiet ways. How even in her absence, her love lingered in every corner of the home we'd built. One afternoon, as I finished trimming the hedges, a letter arrived, Eric's handwriting, shaky and unfamiliar on the envelope. I sat at the kitchen table, turning the envelope over in my hands for a long time before opening it. "Dad," it began, "I don't know what you want from me anymore. I guess you think you're teaching me a lesson, but all I feel is lost. I'm angry, yes, but mostly I'm hurt. I can't believe you turn your back on your own family, just when we need you the most. Megan barely speaks to me these days. The condo's up for sale. I guess this is what you wanted, to see me struggle. I hope you're happy." I read the letter twice, letting the words settle. Yes, he was angry. Yes, he blamed me. But underneath the sharpness, I heard something else, confusion, maybe even grief. I set the letter aside, feeling tired but not defeated. I sat out on the porch that evening, watching the sky darken over the street. I thought about all the years I'd spent believing that love meant shielding Eric from every hard thing, every disappointment. But love, I'd come to realize, meant sometimes stepping back, letting someone fall, letting them stand up on their own. Joe came by after dinner, bringing a pie Linda had baked. We sat together on the porch, trading stories and sipping coffee as the stars blinked to life overhead. He listened quietly as I told him about Eric's letter. "He's angry now," Joe said. "But one day, maybe he'll see it different. You did what you had to do. There's no shame in letting your child learn what you already know, that life's hard, but we get through it. We always do." That night I slept deeply. I dreamed of Lillian, her laugh, her steady presence, the comfort of her hand in mine. In the dream, she smiled at me, her eyes full of understanding. When I woke, I felt calm, as if she told me herself that I'd made the right choice. The next day, I wrote Eric back. I told him, "Son, I'll always love you. But part of that love is knowing when to let go. I hope one day you'll understand. I hope you'll find the strength I always knew you had." I didn't send money. I didn't offer solutions. I sent only my love, and the hope that, one day, he'd grow into the man Lillian and I had believed he could be. Summer came to Willow Park, and with it a gentle rhythm. Mornings found me watering the garden, afternoons spent reading on the porch or tinkering in the garage. Neighbors would stop by, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to drop off a pie or a batch of cookies, filling my kitchen with kindness I'd never expected but deeply appreciated. I realized how much Lillian had shaped this community, how her warmth lingered in the way people cared for each other. I felt her in the laughter of children playing in the street, in the scent of lavender drifting through the window. I still visited her grave each Sunday. I told her about the new things I was trying, the bridge games at the rec center, the cooking classes at the church, the little trip I'd finally taken up to Mendocino, just like we'd always talked about. Each time I knelt by her headstone, I felt less alone. Lillian's love wasn't just a memory, it was the root of everything good that remained. Then, one August afternoon, my phone rang. For a moment I considered not answering. But something in me said to pick up. It was Eric. His voice was quieter, stripped of the entitlement and anger I'd grown used to. "Hi, Dad." I waited, letting the silence stretch. "I wanted to let you know we sold the condo," he finally said. "Megan's living with her parents for now. I found a place in a smaller town upstate. Got a new job, marketing for a local business. It's not as flashy, but it pays the bills." He'd paused, and I heard the strain in his voice. "I was angry, you know. I thought you were punishing me. Maybe you were. But I think I get it now. Mom would have understood, even if I didn't." I closed my eyes, relief and sadness mixing in my chest. "I never wanted to punish you, Eric. I just couldn't keep carrying everything for you. Your mother believed in you. I do too. But I had to let you stand on your own." For the first time in years, he didn't argue. "I know, Dad. I'm sorry about the funeral. I was selfish. I didn't want to see her like that. I thought if I stayed away, it would hurt less." There was a long, painful silence, but it was honest. "It hurt either way," he finally said. "It does," I agreed. "But pain's part of loving people. Your mother knew that. She never stopped loving you, not for a single day." He cleared his throat. Maybe I could come visit sometime? I'd like to see the house. Help you with the garden. Maybe, just talk." I felt Lillian's spirit in that moment, her forgiveness, her endless hope. "You can come any time, son. There'll always be a place for you here." We didn't say much else. The call ended quietly, with no promises, just a simple, "See you soon." But as I sat there in the golden afternoon, I felt something old and heavy finally lift from my shoulders. I knew the future wouldn't be perfect. There would still be wounds, still be gaps that couldn't be filled. But for the first time since Lillian's passing, I felt something real, hope. A few days later, Eric showed up at my door. He looked thinner, older, but his eyes were clearer. We didn't talk about money or blame or the past. We talked about Lillian, her garden, her recipes, the trips she always wanted us to take. We weeded the beds together, silent at first, then laughing as he told stories from his new job, his new life. At sunset, we sat on the porch, watching the sky fade from orange to purple. He asked if I ever regretted cutting him off, making him face things alone. I thought about it, then shook my head. "I regret that it had to come to that, Eric. But I don't regret letting you stand on your own. Your mother wanted you to grow. I did too. You found your way, even if it was the hard way." He nodded, and for the first time, I saw not the lost boy I'd tried to save, but a man finding his own footing. Lillian would have been proud. When Eric left, he hugged me, a real embrace, strong and certain. "Thanks, Dad. For everything. I'm going to be okay." I watched him drive away. The summer evening warm around me. I felt Lillian beside me in the hush that followed, her hand in mine, her love still the quiet root beneath all things. I realized then that I'd finally let go, not just of Eric's troubles, but of my own need to fix everything, to hold the world together by myself. I was just Henry now. Husband, father, grandfather, keeper of Lillian's garden, teller of old stories, a man who'd learned that loving sometimes means letting go. And for the first time in a long, long while, I was at peace.